Hey, my name's Joe Biden, and I'd like to welcome everyone to this special webcast to talk about why we think that the Obama-Biden ticket is the right one for America's women, for all Americans in my view. First, let me say how great it is to be here with Hillary. Hillary and I have been friends for a long, long time. We've been colleagues in the Senate, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again, that Hillary is and will continue to be one of the great leaders in our country. You're not just a great woman leader, Hillary. You're a great leader, and
thanks, Joe.
Everybody knows it. I'd like to continue to make history with Hillary by having her help us get elected here. The truth of the matter is we've worked on so many things. The most important election in our lifetime. You've been saying it. I've been saying it. There's no one listening to this webcast who will be able to say, if they're even my mother's age, 91 years old, that there's ever been a more important election. And particularly, in my view, important for women. We're in a situation right now where when Election Day rolls around, we're going to have a very, very stark choice. And the choice is going to be whether or not we're going to continue down this road to oblivion, particularly for women. Think about it. You and I have daughters. Our daughters are facing the prospect that these guys will change the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. Change in a way not only take away their right to choose, but their right to actually redress the discrimination against them when they don't get equal pay for equal work. So if you look at it across the board, and particularly women who are struggling the most, if these guys had their way, John McCain's voted 19 times against raising the minimum wage for people who are just trying to get to the next day. So folks, there's an awful lot at stake. There's an awful lot at stake in this election. And I think that hopefully we get into a conversation here and talk about, answer your questions, but talk about why I believe with every fiber in my being that we have a gigantic opportunity. We got a gigantic opportunity to level the playing field, level the playing for women for the first time in modern history, first time in history. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. So hopefully we're going to get an opportunity to talk about a lot of these things, because you know what the Bush economy has done to women as well as the men, but particularly women. And you know what John McCain and Sarah Palin will continue. And so hopefully we're going to get a chance to lead this country, get it back on track like you and President Clinton had it on track, where women's income were actually growing, women were actually getting better opportunities in the workplace, women's rights were being protected by a Supreme Court because we put people on the court, you put people on the court that understood that equality means equality. So I'm anxious to hear the questions. I'm anxious to keep this campaign moving, because I tell you what, there's a lot at stake, and I'm just honored to be here with Hillary. And this is not being solicitous. We truly are good friends. I look to her for advice. I've always looked to her for friendship, and thanks for being here, Hillary.
Oh, Joe, it's always a pleasure. I just want to reinforce our friendship and to tell everybody who is participating in this webcast that Joe Biden is a real champion for working people, and he has always, maybe it's because of your mom and your wife and your sister and your daughter, all of whom I know, he has always been one of the leaders on behalf of women. He's always been there with us, fighting by our side. And I've had the privilege of working with Joe over many years on a number of issues that I care deeply about, including the Violence Against Women Act, which he wrote, he championed, he got passed through the Congress. And just this past Sunday, I was campaigning for Senator Obama and Senator Biden in Ohio, and I heard from women and men, from all backgrounds, how concerned they are about what's happening in our country. I don't see how anyone can look at the last 8 years and with good conscience say, oh, let's get 4 more. There is no doubt in my mind that 4 more years would be devastating to this country we love so much. And that's why I'm working so hard for Barack and Joe. Because what I hear is from the mother who couldn't afford health care for her child because she was laid off, and so she lost it. Or the young man who had to take on a second job just to afford gas and put food on the table. Or the loving daughter struggling to make ends meet because she's caring for both her children and her parents at the same time. These are the kinds of challenges that Americans are dealing with every single day in their lives, and I believe completely that Barack Obama and Joe Biden care about what's going on in your home, in your business, in your community. They've got the new ideas, and the positive change that they'll bring will really pull this country back out of this abyss that it's fallen into in every respect because of the failed leadership of George Bush. And Senator McCain and Governor Palin offer just more of the same. So tonight I'm looking forward to talking with all of you, along with my good friend Joe, about what's at stake for women and for men. But we're focusing a lot on women these days because, as Joe said, women are often bearing the brunt of the economic changes. Frequently the first laid off, the ones who were not paid equally to begin with, so that when the downturn comes, they're really at risk. The ones who are struggling to keep body and soul together, to piece together the health care, to take care of our parents, and so much else. You know, Joe and I are lucky to still have our mothers with us. His is 91, mine's a young 89. And so we're living what we know so many other families are going through. So Joe, I'm ready to get started, and I think we've got some questions from folks, so let's get going.
Hillary, there's a question we have here from Julie from Louisiana about health care and pre-existing conditions. We've seen a lot of questions like this. Here's the exact question. Senator Clinton, would Senator Obama's plan allow health insurance companies to deny coverage as to pre-existing conditions?
Well, the short answer, Julie, is no. And I'm very happy to be able to give that answer. It's a great question. It's something that is a problem for so many Americans. And if you're not lucky enough to be covered under a big group health care plan in this country, you have to find insurance coverage on your own. And unless you and every member of your family has a perfect health record, and if you're not a woman of childbearing age, may I add, you can find it very difficult to be able to obtain affordable quality insurance. You know, one thing insurance companies love to do, Joe, and you know this, is to deny coverage because of what they call some pre-existing condition, whether it's cancer or sinus infections or, yes, pregnancy. And in the individual market, if you're pregnant and trying to get insurance, they can deny you coverage. We know that's wrong, and Senator Obama believes that insurance companies should not be allowed to only cover people who have never been sick, never been pregnant, never had a child, and he certainly believes that insurance companies should not be allowed to deny coverage based on these pre-existing conditions, like pregnancy, for goodness sakes. So his plan would prohibit insurance companies from denying people coverage because of pre-existing conditions, and he would create new affordable options for people who have to get their insurance in the individual market. That's a very important difference between Senator Obama's plan and Senator McCain. Senator McCain's plan would actually make health care harder to reach for most people. His plan would not only do away with group insurance, which is the way most people get insurance today. He would give people a tax credit to purchase insurance that wouldn't even cover the most basic cost of insurance. His message is you're on your own when it comes to health insurance.
By the way, John does do one thing. He wants to tax his income, the health care benefits you get through your employer.
Yes, right, which would just destroy the employer-based system. Now here's a question for you, Joe. It's from Nancy in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it's about work-family balance, something that we all live with, and you have been, you know, such a great example going home every night from the Senate back to Delaware, and I don't know how you did it, but your family obviously came first in every respect. We've got a lot of questions that have come in on family leave policies, including a similar one from Sonia in Loganville, Georgia. Here's the question from Nancy. I am married with 2 boys. I have retired parents in the area, and I work full-time. Sounds familiar. Even with a wonderfully supportive spouse, there just doesn't seem to be enough time in the day. And I'm worried that if anyone in my family fell ill, I wouldn't have the flexibility to take time off to care for them. What would Senator Obama do to help my situation?
Well, look, you were kind enough to say I went home every night. That's true. And I've never missed my kids' parent-teacher meeting. I've gone to their games. But guess what? I don't have a boss. I have 1 million people at home who are my boss. And I was able to do that. Being a single father for 5 years, I had a lot of help, and I had a good income. I can only imagine what it's like for people who are struggling financially, and if they're on their own with no help of family. So I don't mean to suggest that what I've been through and how I've done it is like most American women have to deal with it. But here's the things that we want to do to allow American women to be able to do what I was able to do because I don't have a boss in that same circumstance with my mother and children living with me. Number one, we want to make sure that you're able to have paid sick leave. It's one thing to be able to say you get time off, but you're struggling to pay your mortgage, which is you're in trouble with, or put gas in your automobile. You ought to have 7 days a year where when you get that call that your child is sick and has to be taken to the hospital because of a playground accident, like my son Hunter, I remember getting called. You know, you remember those. Every parent does. Well, or that you're, or that you literally have a very sick child and you got to stay home. You ought to have 7 days of paid leave, number one. Number two, there's this thing called the Child Independent Care Tax Credit. 7.5 million more women in America would qualify for this. And what it means is anybody making under $50,000 a year, for example, would get $2,100 in refundable tax credit. They'd get, if their taxes were zero, they get $2,100 check to help pay for the daycare, help pay for the help to take care of their kids while they're at work. In addition to that, they'd get a $1,000 permanent tax cut for middle-class people. So you enable people to be able to work and still care for their kids. Have them in a safe environment. The third thing is we'd reform family and medical leave. Right now, you get a call and your son or daughter is either doing very well or having trouble in school, and the teacher wants to meet with you. The principal wants to talk about it. They want to just spend a half an hour with you. Well, you ought to get 24 hours a year that you can divide up any way you want to go to academic-related things relating to your children. And we're going to help states encourage that for all their employees by giving them financial incentives to say that every state employee will have the same kind of benefit, because we can't dictate that, as you know, to the states. And lastly, flex time. Look, my office and your office work the same way. The women, as well as the men in my office, they're allowed to tell me what the best time for them to work and still care for their families. So the woman who's headed up my, a first-rate lawyer, her name is Jane, she's run my operation for a long time. When her child was in the last couple years of high school, she wanted to be home for breakfast, get the child to school, and so on. So she said, look, I'm going to come in later, but what I'll do is I'll be able to stay a little bit later because she plays after-school sports, etc. We allow flex time in our offices. Well, as a federal policy, we would put in place flex time for all federal employees to be able to, and by the way, as you know, you're one of the first people to talk about this. You talked about this 20 years ago. What it does is it actually increases productivity.
That's right.
It actually helps the employer. And so there's some of the things we do to allow Nancy in Georgia to be able to care both for her mom as well as her kids without having to make a real financial sacrifice to do it. It's hard enough as it is. I always ask my wife, I say to Jill, Jill, what's the single most important thing you need more of? And her response is time.
Absolutely. Time. You know, that I hear that, I feel that. I think we all do in today's world. But, you know, what you've just outlined would make such a difference for so many families across America.
Well, we got another question here. This is a question from Allison in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And she talks about the question of whether or not, no, actually, I've got the wrong question here. I'm skipping questions here on you. This is a question from Tess in Portland, Oregon about a contraceptive policy. She says, my name is Tess and I'm from Oregon. My question has to do with insurance coverage of birth control. Last year, Oregon passed a law to make sure that insurance companies have to cover birth control if they cover other forms of prescription drugs. She said, I know a lot of other states haven't done this, and it doesn't seem fair. What is your position on this, and what will you do to protect women's access to affordable birth control?
Well, unfortunately, this is true, Tess, as you have found, and I really appreciate your asking the question. I and others have been trying to get that law changed at the federal level for a number of years now, because while most healthcare plans do cover contraception, there are some in the private market that will cover other prescription drugs, but not contraception. And I think that's wrong, and I know Senator Obama and you think that's wrong too, Joe. That's why we've promoted legislation that would require all health plans that cover prescription drugs also cover contraception. Now, 26 states have a law like this already in place. Senator Obama championed that law when he was a state senator in Illinois. And we believe it should be everywhere. It should be the law of the land. Senator McCain has opposed this legislation. I guess he thinks it's okay for men to get a certain prescription drug that they may want, but that women should not have coverage for their birth control pills. And I just, for the life of me, don't understand how anybody could promote such inequity. And of course, we're going to do everything we can when President Obama is in the White House to end this discrepancy. Now there's a question for you, Joe, from Crystal in Elks County, Pennsylvania, about violence against women. And this is a question that, Crystal, I'm very glad that you asked Senator Biden, because he has been such a champion for protecting women from domestic violence for many years. So here's the question. Hi, my name is Crystal, and I'm from Elks County, Pennsylvania. I understand that 1 in 3 women will be the victim of violence in her lifetime. If you and Senator Obama are elected, what would you do to address this? And, Crystal, your question could not come to a better person, because you are looking at the champion of our cause against domestic violence going back many years. And Joe, you could talk about this, I know, for a long time, because you feel so passionately about it. And I want you to explain to Crystal and everybody watching what you've done and what we will do.
Look, first of all, thank you for the compliment. Of anything and everything I've ever done in the Senate, the single proudest achievement for me, in my mind, is the Violence Against Women Act. And what it's done is it has freed literally tens of thousands of women from imprisonment in their own homes. I hate this phrase, domestic violence. It's the most vicious form of violence. Someone you allegedly love and care about to beat and to subjugate is just, the ultimate cardinal sin is the abuse of power, and this is the ultimate abuse of power, just because you're physically more powerful or financially able to intimidate. And so there's a couple things that we want to do. Number one, we want to prevent the next administration, if it's not ours, from being able to do away with this legislation. When this came up for a vote, John McCain voted against the Violence Against Women Act, voted against it. And 70% of all the women who will show up in an emergency ward today with a broken bone or bleeding are there as a consequence of a man's fist. And so what we do is we continue to fund not only shelters. Why don't women leave? Why are 70% of the kids on the street homeless? Because their mothers have been victims of violence and been beaten, and they have no place to go. So the first thing you got to do is you got to get in immediately and give women access to safety right away, not in a day or two or a month, right away. That's why we have this hotline, Hillary. 1.5 million people, as you know, women, have huddled somewhere in a corner, screwed up the courage to call and say, I need help. Here he comes, he's about to beat me. What can I do? How do we get me somewhere? And so what we do is we have funded the training of the courts and police officers to deal with this issue in a way that it reflects the reality. That is, that go out there and arrest on information, as they call it. It used to be, the woman would have to say, well, he hit me and he beat me. If a cop walks in and sees a woman bleeding and a guy standing there, he can arrest on information. Just say, you're under arrest. You get stay-away orders put in place immediately, insisting that the man stay away. And if he violates that order accidentally or not, he goes to jail. Mm-hmm. The third thing we do is provide decent housing for women. They don't leave this setting. I love men who say, well, why don't they just leave? Where are they going to leave to?
Right.
Leave to the street?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, with your help and the appropriations, we've funded tens of millions of dollars of building new shelters, decent, real shelters that are temporary. And then we need now to be able to transition those women into permanent housing so they can be on their own. They don't have to go back to that prison they were in. And maybe even the most important thing to do is that to teach young women that there is no circumstance, none None, none, where a man has a right to raise a hand to a woman other than in self-defense. And this is all contained in the features of the Violence Against Women Act, and every year we have to fight.
I know.
Every year we have to fight to keep it in place. And so the good news is, I can say, the good news is more and more women are coming forward. More and more companies are being supportive of women who were victims of domestic abuse rather than fire them because they want to be involved. More and more courts are putting men in prison who will not stay away. More and more help is coming for women who are in this abusive circumstance. And the last thing I want to say is, and I say to any lawyer out there listening to this, any woman lawyer or male lawyer listen to this, I'm trying to put together a 100,000 person volunteer legal organization that will be administered through the ABA, the American Bar Association, prepared to do it, so that every single woman who is the victim of abuse will not only have a prosecutor on her side, but will have a lawyer assigned to her, a competent lawyer, be able to pick up the phone. They'll be told, you're going to have Sarah Wilson who's going to be with you and take you all the way through this process. Because women have been re-victimized in the courts.
That's right.
They've been re-victimized. And so I ask for help. 100,000 lawyers we need to be able to stand next to these women who have the courage to stand up, come forward and say, stop, stop, I'll take no more of it. So there's a lot we can do, a lot we've done, but a lot more we can do. And if we put this in the hands of the McCain-Palin, I assume she shares his view, this is viewed as not the role of government. It is the ultimate role of government.
It's a crime.
The abuse. It's
It
the ugliest
is a crime. It is not a family problem or a cultural artifact. It is a crime. And you have done so much to make sure that people know that they don't have to put up with it and then create the support system for them. You know, Joe, this whole question about women's economic security really comes home when we think about retirement security. And Betty from Cincinnati, Ohio, has a question that a lot of people were asking when we opened this up and said, you know, please ask us what's on your mind. Laura from Kent, Ohio, also asked about this issue. So here's the question from Betty. Betty wrote in, I'm in my mid-50s, and I'm deeply concerned about Social Security being there for me and for my kids. I've been getting Social Security survivor benefits, which have given me the ability to raise my kids in a good home. But I'm worried about my own retirement years. I heard this all over the country, and I know you did as well. And people want to know, what will Senator Obama do to protect Social Security?
Let me start out by telling you what he won't do. He will not privatize it.
Right.
Imagine if you had your Social Security dependent on the market today, the stock market today. Imagine what kind of shape you'd be in and what agita, as my Italian friends say, you'd have, number one.
Right.
Number two, a lot of the very women we're talking about, as well as men, find themselves in a situation where at least they had equity in their home. Their home values had risen. They thought, okay, in my retirement years, my kids will be gone. I can go ahead and I can sell my home and I'll have X amount of money for my retirement. Now a lot of them are faced with the prospect that their mortgage is more than the value of their home. We would make sure that we changed the bankruptcy laws so that, in fact, you wouldn't be put in a position where you'd have to, where the bankruptcy judge could say, hey, look, what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the total amount of money you owe on your mortgage in bankruptcy. So you're able to stay in your home, you're able to rebuild some equity in the home, but you're not forced out of your home. We'd also make sure that you are able to, under our, if you are a senior and you have income that is under $50,000, you're not going to pay any taxes at all. Zero federal taxes in your retirement years, none at all. In addition to that, with regard to right now, an awful lot of these companies, like I have a very good friend, a woman who flew for one of the major airlines. She worked for 25 years. Her pension was there, and all of a sudden they declare bankruptcy. But you know what? When they say declare bankruptcy, you know what they mean? They say reorganize.
Oh, yes, of course.
And reorganize means they wipe out the pension of everybody. They have these golden parachutes, and then we rehire. They rehire the very management that caused them to go into this position. and say we need extra money, in one case of one airline, another $20 million to pay these people to stay. So we want to change the bankruptcy law there and say, by the way, you wipe out pensions, you wipe out your own pension, you wipe out your own golden parachute. You cannot benefit from this. And the last thing we do to make sure that Betty's daughter and others don't have to go through the same thing is we will mandate that anyone who wants to put any portion of their pay into a retirement fund, it has to be accommodated by the company there, then on the spot, so that you get in the habit of saving and get in the habit of being able to build eventually a nest egg to be able to have a decent retirement. But most importantly, Betty should understand, promise you, Betty, no impact on your Social Security if you're in your mid-50s because of what your husband did, what you did, what we did some years ago. That system is safe to 2041 or 2042, so don't let them scare you. And we got to fix it for your daughter and your son now, and the way Barack's suggesting to do that is similar to what you talked about. Go out there and negotiate with the Republicans as to how they're going to do it. But we're not going to cut benefits. We're not going to raise the retirement age, and we're not going to privatize. And one of the things we're going to start with is a proposal to say those making over $250,000 should pay a little bit more in their Social Security than they're paying now to extend the system. But I don't want Betty or anybody else who's in their mid-50s to think that this system's not going to be there for them, Social Security. As long as we don't let them privatize it, they're going to be all right. It's our children, Chelsea, Ashley, we've got to get this system straightened out for, and we can do that.
I agree with you, absolutely.
Hillary, Abby from Philadelphia has a question, and she wants to talk about pay equity, which I'm happy we're talking about here. She says, I hear a lot of candidates talk about equal pay for equal work. It seems apparent to me that women and men should be paid the same for equal work. Where does Senator Obama stand on this issue?
Well, this is one of the big differences in this campaign, and I think that everybody understands that today, in 2008, women still make just 77 cents for every dollar that men make, and African American women just 62 cents, and Latinas just 53 cents. And we have all these studies, a recent one by the Institute for Women's Policy Research, that if we close this gap, the typical woman worker would gain roughly $5,700 a year. Now, that would be a huge deal. It's also a big deal for retirement. You were just talking about retirement and Social Security. Well, the more you pay in, the more your salary rises, obviously the better your retirement. But when women are cheated out of their fair share, that affects their retirement as well. You know, last year in a case brought by an extraordinary woman named Lilly Ledbetter, the Supreme Court actually made it harder for women to challenge pay discrimination. And I'm thrilled that Lilly Ledbetter is going to be by your side and by Senator Obama's side, endorsing you and standing up with you, because she knows that if you're worried about equal pay, there's only one ticket that is going to care about whether or not women get equal pay. And it's not just a women's issue, it's a family issue, it's a children's issue, it's a men's issue. Because when women aren't paid what they deserve, families find themselves with less income, and they have to work even harder to get by. Think about how many thousands of dollars Lilly Ledbetter's family lost over the years. Exactly right. Money that could have gone for gas or groceries or saved up for college or retirement. And think of how many families today, just like Lilly Ledbetter's, are losing out because the women in their family are not being paid on equity with men. You know, we see the effects on families across the country. We know that women's poverty rates are higher than men's poverty rates. We know that women working full-time have to still rely on food stamps to bring food for the table for their kids. And we know that so many families couldn't get by without relying on the income that working women have earned. So you'd think that this would not be a partisan issue and there would be no divide between the Republicans and the Democrats, because this is a question of justice and equality. But unfortunately, there is such a gap. And we've tried, as you know, to fix the Lilly Ledbetter problem that the Supreme Court created. Senator McCain and Senator Obama have a huge difference on this issue. Senator McCain thinks the Supreme Court got it right when Lilly Ledbetter was denied justice. He opposed legislation that I co-sponsored to reverse that decision. He suggested that the reason women don't get equal pay isn't discrimination on the job. It's because they need more education and training. So I guess the bottom line, Joe, is that for women, for men, for any American, the stakes in this election are so high. And if you care about health care or retirement or equal pay or our economy, I hope you know that there's only one choice, and that is Barack Obama and Joe Biden.
Let me add one thing to what you said. John is so out of touch, he doesn't realize there's more women in college today than men. Literally.
I know.
More people graduating the top of their class, Phi Beta Kappa, more women like you who graduated ahead of the men in their classes. And this is not a zero-sum game. I don't know how many times, Hillary, out on the road, I hear the following. You know, if my wife loses her job, we lose our house. Right. If my wife loses her job, da-da. I mean, the idea that they've been able to convince, and I think the subliminal message the right is sending is, somehow, if you pay a woman equal to a man, it's going to cost a man. This does not cost. Men should be out there going, pray God,
right.
Pay my wife what she deserves.
That's right.
Hillary, thanks. It's a big deal you being here. If there's any ultimate validator in the United States of America for whether or not we care about the plight and circumstance of women in America, it's you.
Thank you.
And I'm honored you're here. Look, folks, this is, I'll end where I began, the single most important election you've ever voted on in your entire life. And you know what? I want to go back to one thing we didn't get much chance to talk about. If John McCain and Sarah Palin are elected, they made it clear they want to change the Supreme Court. All the things we talked about, equal pay, access to choice, access to every single thing that affects the life of women in a negative way right now, will be complicated by the fact they're going to put 2 more, and maybe even 3, justices on the Supreme Court who will be there for 30 to 40 years. This is the single most important election you've ever participated in. We desperately need your help. And I give you my word as a Biden. I give you my word I would have never joined this ticket if I didn't believe Barack Obama was as committed as I am and as committed as Hillary is to make sure that women have an equal shot. His daughters deserve it. Our daughters deserve it. My wife deserves it. And my mother should have had it. So folks, please, we need your help. Thank you, and thank you, Hillary, for being with us.
Thanks, Joe.